All right, welcome into Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn, I'm your host, Matt Landis, and we're here for a special episode with Adam, who has some news to share. We wanted to share it directly with all of you first, right here on this show. Adam, take it away.
Yeah, cheers, Matt. We just wanted to be very transparent. Now, I'm Plannatech. Well, I'm wearing the Prime Sport. Prime Sports is a client of Plannatech. So what I wanted to sort of speak about, because I know I've been the face of this thing a bit from the Plannatech side, is today that Prime Sports earlier, which is out the gate company, has filed for bankruptcy protection. This move will help Prime Sports cut unnecessary costs, rebuild the structure, and bring in new investors who believe in what we are doing and where we are headed. The most important part, and this is the key aspect of it, your balances, pending wages, future winnings are all 100% secure and guaranteed. Nothing changes in your ability to play, win, or withdraw. This is not the end. What's happening here while out the gate Prime Sports is going into this protection, Plannatech, as the lead secured debt for Prime Sports, are using just as a reset that's needed. We've always been a home for players who expect more, sharper service, better treatment, and the kind of respect that's hard to find elsewhere. That's what our niche has been in this industry. That's what we continue to want to push out there. The process will give us foundation to hit the market even harder and keep that promise alive. We're working directly with the regulators, vendors, partners to make sure that we come out the other side even stronger. Our goal, and my goal as Plannatech, is to stay true to the players who've backed us and who have come with the same edge and energy that made us who we are. Now, having been going through these conversations, we know bankruptcy can sound scary, but have no fear. We've got this handled and we're focused on the future. The team's still here, the lights are still on, and the mission hasn't changed. Our goal, and only what we're doing here, is being transparent and thanking you for sticking with us. The next chapter starts now, and it's going to be a good one. Ultimately, again, CEO of Plannatech, we're in conversations of being able to continue the business as it is, as the secured lender in this experience. I'm new to this, I'm learning as I go along, but the goal is to keep all the pieces together, brand, states, and the same great product that people are asking for in other states. The goal is to continue building. And yeah, Matt, this is what we're doing right now. I'm seeing a lot of positive out of it. I know there'll be a lot of negativity seen about it. Yes, I've said this every time we do an episode. This is hard. This is expensive. And the state regulated model is, with raising taxes and all those is just a difficult pathway into this. That's where we're at. We want to be very upfront, very transparent. And I know John, who's the CEO, president of Prime Sports, is ultimately looking to continue this journey on as well.
A lot to unpack there. So, Adam, I'll probably pepper you with some follow-up questions to elaborate on some of the points that you've already made. And as a jumping off point there, would love to dig in a bit deeper on your perspective on what this actually means for bettors, partners, and the future of the Prime Sports brand.
The idea is to continue to build. I'm obviously, again, Plannatech, we're a provider for Prime Sports, but this has ultimately been the journey that we've taken now in Arizona with BetChris under a Plannatech license. For me, this is just an expansion of Plannatech into the B2C space that we'd already started in Arizona, and an opportunity where we believe what Prime Sports have built from Joe to John and then continuing on it's why we're here. There's a need for it, there's a request for it, and I think it's going to open up opportunities to reduce the costs, make the whole process more efficient. We've learned a lot. I guarantee you we've learned a lot over the 3, 4, 5 years that this journey's been going on. And I think it's just going to help us be a little smarter with where the expenses are, potentially get new investors down the road. But right now it's Plannatech's goal to just keep this thing together and keep it moving forward.
And one thing I've heard you mention a few times is reducing costs or keeping expenses in check, if I'm paraphrasing correctly. Are there any top trends that stand out when you think about what this could look like behind the scenes and what, if anything, that could look like from a bettor's perspective?
Yeah, and this is very much a behind the scenes thing. This is just a restructuring. Nothing should change on the front end, nothing on the customer service, nothing on the player experience. But you did raise a point. What are the key costs? Market accesses. The states, have given these real estate licenses to casinos, to sports teams, to things like that. And we've seen a lot of places get taken down, the Fubos, the Twin Spires. A lot of that was because of the cost to get market access. Prime Sports had the same issue. Their hope was to be able to negotiate terms into what today's prices, not 4 years ago prices. And from what I've gathered is that it hasn't been completely successful in being able to do that. So the idea is to go back to those parties in this position and try and continue those things. If not, potentially look for other partners. But yeah, that's kind of the challenging thing, is those behind the scenes costs that are, exorbitant for where we're at on a very small scale. Doesn't hurt a DraftKings or a FanDuel. Yeah, I'm sure it's something they'd like to reduce in what they're paying to these market accesses in various states. But it's just a challenge, and it's a, guaranteed minimum every year that has to be paid up front for the year ahead. And just over the last number of years, Prime Sports just hasn't met those minimums, but they're definitely building in the right direction. And that's why the last 3 or 4 months, as we've been funding it, pushing it forward, ultimately leading to this position, is knowing that it is growing. It is moving in the right direction. Like we spoke, just in yesterday's episode, what have we seen that first half of the football season? We've seen growth. We've seen traction. And there's just a few little things that I think as Plannatech, we would do different than what Prime Sports did. And this has kind of given us the keys to the bus now as we try and put this thing together and do it a little bit differently.
And one thing I've always appreciated during our time working together on this show has been your transparency across the board. To that end, what more can you share about the current state of the Prime Sports business with its investors, and what the Prime Sports brand is looking for when it comes to potential future investment opportunities, as you've kind of touched on thus far?
Yeah, I mean, we still really need to bring it back to bare bones. I don't have access to all their financials. This is a process that they go through. We're just listed as kind of the lead bidder in getting the assets and getting the company. There's been various conversations, all new to me, on what this ultimately means. Player funds are secured. They're separated out of the daily business thing, and they're always overseen by regulators and checked regularly. So all those things are secured, and we've made sure and seen that. And that's our number one priority as we move forward, is obviously looking at those things, checking balances daily. But again, as this process goes through, we're learning it along the way, and then we're getting to see exactly what their position is. We had to go through like a budgeting of what it would cost to go through the process, which is like a 12, 13 week thing, and then ultimately see what comes out the other side. Do we expect the whole thing to be held together as is? Hopefully. Will there be a chance that, if there's a small variance or maybe a, difference in what states available, things like that? Possibly. But the main thing that we're trying to get out there is nothing changes for the player right now. They can continue playing. They expect to get the same service. Their money would be guaranteed. Everything's protected. And that's kind of the main thing of getting out and having this open conversation is, I've said it for a long time, like, this is the goal. We want to take the bets, as many bets as possible, build up the liquidity and grow this thing. And right now we're doing it as BetCris Arizona. And now all this is just an expansion for Plannatech, seeing what's potentially been built by Prime Sports, but just thinking maybe we can do it a little bit differently. And we want to take those assets and what they've built and bring them in-house and then continue on the journey.
All right, I think we've done about the best we can in terms of giving some framing and context behind what just happened, what's going on right now with Prime. But Adam, to tie a bow around this part of the conversation, if you put yourself in the shoes of a bettor hearing this news today, what would you say about what practically changes for them?
I mean, as a bettor, having gone through many of these experiences in other parts of the countries where you hear bankruptcy or you get slow paid or no paid and all those kind of things, your first thing is withdraw the money, get out of here, not be on the sinking ship. That's why we're getting forward and speaking about this. That's not happening here. Just, I guess, like last week, I mean, it was kind of impeccable timing with ESPN Bet going back to the score. It's still Penn that is powering that. I mean, even kind of like our Arizona side, it was, BetCris powered by Plannatech. Penn's websites were always ESPN Bet powered by Penn. That's all this is. Plannatech's looking to power this, take over the brand, take over the operations, take over the costs, and continue this journey forward. So while the first thought is bankruptcy, scary, get out of there, as much as I can say, don't be afraid. This is just the reset, a new pivot, new beginning, however you want to look at this. Stick with us. You'll continue to get the same support, same ability to get a decent, fair bet on. And I'm available. I mean, anyone that feels like they need to have a one-to-one conversations, whether it's through DM me on Twitter or LinkedIn or anything like that. As I said, I have some information. I don't have all the information. I'm getting more and more as we go day by day. And within the next sort of 5 to 7 days, we'll have a much better idea of how this plays out. Right now, it's in the procedural process of how all this works. As I said, learning as I go. Joe's been a great help as well with communicating on how this works and things like that. So, and he was there at the beginning. He wants to see this thing continue to grow as well. And that's our goal, just to be there. We're bookmakers. We want to take bets, and everybody's dollar is protected.
I think part of that answer we can use as a transition going a bit deeper on the inside baseball here, if you will, a bit more on what's really going on behind the scenes to give some of our industry savvy listeners some meat to chew on. You touched on a parallel with ESPN Bet and the Score Bet and Penn Entertainment, how that whole ecosystem operates, a bit of a connection to what you're experiencing firsthand right now. So let's talk a bit more on the mechanics here, Adam. When a company in this space goes through a restructuring process like this, how would you describe some of the typical catalysts and which of those do and perhaps do not apply in Prime's case?
So again, new to this, learning as I go. But I think the whole purpose is to give you time to take a breath, to restructure, to renegotiate contracts, to see what contracts are still viable. Again, we're a secondary company coming into the primary company now, getting to look under the hood a bit more and see what their financials look for, see what the budget looks for, see, what they have employee-wise, vendor-wise, market access-wise. We haven't been privy to this information previously. So it's going to take time to go through this process. But I believe this is more of a protection rather than a shutdown. It's just more about Plannatech now coming in, having a look and seeing how do we, make this more efficient? How do we make this where it, has another 10, 15 years at least to sort of push forward, which has kind of been the goal of what we're building here. So from my personal experience, we always see headlines of, this company goes into bankruptcy and this, and hell, even your current president has gone through many of these over his lifetime, from what I understand, and he still seems in a pretty good position. So it's just about taking a look at what the company is, where we want to take it, and having the conversations with those contracted vendors that Prime Sports have, that Plannatech will take over and continue this journey forward. But the main thing at the bottom of this is that's all in the background. Yes, I want to be able to share as much as I can because I'm learning as I go along as well. So this is very educational, and the ability to be able to share and sort of be able to answer questions that I would have never been asked before is the goal there. But ultimately, the players on the front end shouldn't see anything change, should get the same service, money secured. I know in the past there's been pending wages cancelled on people and they've had great positions, stuff like that. That isn't happening. All of these pending wages will still be offering futures. All these kind of things still exist and are protected.
And if we want to take a step back and look a bit more at the macro view and all of this, what this may say about the industry to get into Prime's position here tied to the broader ecosystem. Of course, as you touched on, this isn't happening in a vacuum, and we have very recently seen some examples of consolidation. There are tight margins, regulatory headwinds. What can you say to add to your points so far in this conversation about how much of this reflects broader pressures in the US regulated market as it sits in November of 2025?
I think this sums it up pretty well. There's no room for small businesses. There's no room for small challenges kind of thing. And that's what we are. It's a duopoly at the top. It's your brick and mortars in the middle. And then it's a few big brands sort of rolling it out, the Fanatics and things like that. Even the ESPN going back to Penn. It's kind of a summary of the easy thing would just be to quit, walk away, become a predictions market. We've spoken about sweeps in the past, which are slowly getting moved out of this. But I believe with the relationships we build with regulators, we're open to those headwinds. Yes, we want a fair ecosystem, and kind of one of those first steps is the market accesses. We need to be able to get into those at a much more viable position than what was put in place 4 or 5 years ago. That's probably the biggest expense to what, I am understanding of where Prime Sports is at, is those market accesses. So it's really just trying to navigate the ecosystem as it is, understand this isn't on the regulators, this is the legislators that change the taxes, change the rules of game, stuff like that. But I think this is kind of indicative of where the industry's at. There is really no space for us, and we're very small versus even a Betfred and some of those things. But we're here, we're going to fight on, and ultimately the challenge is to get through this and look on the other side. For me, it's almost perfect timing as well. Prime Sports and their investors, they put in what they did. They made a run at it. With us being in the middle of the football season, World Cup, which I've spoken about for 4 or 5 years now, and then roll into another football season, come April 1st, 2027, after we're through that Match Madness, we should be in a very, very strong position. If we're not, then again, it shows that it's near impossible for a sort of a niche, small market business to try and come in and compete in this space. But that's it. We're up for the challenge. We think we've got a good 14 to 16 months ahead to really get our teeth into this and expand. Arizona was the first sort of dip the toe into being the B2C. And this just gives Plannatech another opportunity to sort of broaden that horizon, and me personally to get more involved as potentially, the full face of this as Plannatech and whatever brand that is on top of it in these states.
Adam, I think we made it more than 15 minutes into this episode without a mention of prediction markets, although I did hear you drop that a couple minutes ago. So let's acknowledge that for a bit. With prediction markets and offshore books still pulling in bettors, do you think we might be at or nearing an inflection point in terms of what's viable in the regulated sports betting market in the United States?
Very much so. Again, it's very top heavy. It's very difficult to be a small market entry unless you maybe pick 1 or 2 states, which they'd pick 3. Again, I believe you chop out a chunk of that market access cost, it becomes a hell of a lot more viable and a lot more opportunity to make it work. Prediction markets, just in the last few days, I've heard how many people are arbitraging between prediction markets and sportbooks, how much the Kalshi markets are so far off the general market that everybody else is. So it's giving opportunity for people to lean into thinking Kelsey's wrong and taking advantage, thinking that Kelsey's right, pushing it into the books and arbing. For me, as the business and the operator, really hard on the sportsbook state regulated pathway. But, we're seeing the DraftKings, FanDuel looking now to go into that other side because they're building verticals. Our idea potentially is, yes, maybe the states that Prime has, like in New Jersey, can add a casino skin. So I think there's opportunity to be able to try and, again, get the cost down to a certain level, know what we're up against, and then chip away at that. That's the goal here, and that's been the goal the whole way through. Just for us at Plannatech, we haven't seen the Prime, what they spent, what they invested. We don't have access. We haven't seen all that, but we've got a ballpark idea. What we're looking at is through this process, through this protection for that, is to look at those numbers and see what we're ultimately up against and how we can make this work best. Because what are they? 3 years in Ohio, a couple of years in New Jersey, and they're building something. Even Kentucky. Last week was a solid week. They're getting signups. They're getting first-time deposits. They have a business there that's interesting. And that's all I'm doing as a business participant is taking what I have, Plannatech, and now seeing this opportunity where there's not going to be any other bidders to buy these assets or anything like that, in my opinion. So it's now being able to put them into this protection and then us have that conversation of, all right, what is it? What do we need to do? What can we do better? What can we do different and keep the same? That's kind of the challenge we're at right now. And that's just sort of summing up of where the industry is at with the prediction markets and all these other things. I think the conversations we've had over, 100+ previous episodes is how do we fit into that space? How do we help, or how do we make those other products educate people or then help us? How do we take the billions of dollars that have been marketing spend by FanDuel, DraftKings on educating the players? How do we turn those players into educating them even more that this shop has milk at $1, whereas you're paying $2 for it at the other one. We're trying to work out where we fit in this. And all this is expansion for Plannatech.
All right, Adam. So as we round the corner here and look ahead to the future and what's coming next, you touch on this being an expansion opportunity for Plannatech. While it's definitely about setting up Prime to compete more effectively, what do you foresee in the way of potential expansion opportunities, or at least in the way of innovation for Prime specifically, once the dust settles?
Again, it's sort of as much on Plannatech as it is for Prime for us delivering products. Same game parlays at a certain level were added recently. But the goal is, and I think the acceptance is, and while I would have liked a few more states before the World Cup, going in this pathway, ultimately it gives Plannatech 3 more states as an operator. So then that'd bring us to 4. It's to have those 4 going into next football season and picking up more traction, picking up more clients. We just not need more customers. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you need customers, you need liquidity, and then you can sort of build in the margins and keep the costs down. That's ultimately what we're looking to do here. We're not looking at any rebranding. There's no idea right now of moving back, Chris, to these other 3 states. It's status quo while we go through this process and then seeing what comes out the other side. And again, continuing to just try and build what's been put in place. For us, this is a business opportunity. We've been servicing Prime Sports now for 4 years. The idea is, ran into their own headwinds. How do we sort of collaborate and build this thing and continue it going under the same branding, colors, messaging? That's the goal here. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is just say, hey, it's still staying the same. Players are protected. Don't feel like you need to, make a run on your account or anything of that nature. And I'm here. I'm very much public and very accountable to whatever else happens. And that's sort of the conversation being had.
To that point, with your decades of experience in this world on both sides of the counter, I feel like that's tough to find. And it's even tougher to find somebody with that level of experience who is as open and accessible as you are. Again, you mentioned LinkedIn, on Twitter at Adam Bjorn too, if anybody wants to reach out. Adam, for you on a personal level, what's it like trying to harness all of your experience, also learning a lot about bankruptcy on the fly here, and distilling that down to your own internal framework, while at the same time trying to share as much as you can in the spirit of transparency to a wide audience that also has a vested interest in how all of this turns out?
I guess what I've realized more in recent times is it's still gambling. You're just gambling on bigger companies and people, as in managerial people, CEOs, things like that. So this is another gamble for us. Just like betting on Sunday NFL, we're looking to still bet on Prime Sports and continue this thing forward. It's just raising the stakes. It's going after something bigger and then trying to build it and continue the journey that we've been on. We've seen over the last sort of year and a half, the changes within Prime Sports. Joe was the founder. Now he's no longer in that ecosystem. But as we see every week, we're still very much in communication and the back and forth and things like that. So it's purely just going back to a new kind of university, learning business, learning bankruptcy, learning how to strategically go after, certain aspects of the industry and what we're trying to build and things like that. And I think one of the things we've been weak in is marketing. So that's sort of been a lot of the drive now, is how do we get better at that? How does, with Amazon, Apple, Google, the apps, those kind of things. But oddly enough, it's also making sure those journeys, the KYCs, the signups, those sort of things as well, as I think we have a bit more experience than what the Prime team may have had. We've gone through the challenges in Arizona. We've tried to support as much as we can in the other 3 states. But I think there's a lot of room for us to improve. I think with their team and now our team potentially coming on board and putting those 2 worlds together, I think there's a good opportunity to sort of close some of those gaps on what others are offering out there. And again, we are what we are. We're bookmakers. We're here to take a bet. We have fair limits. We try and have, reasonable tight lines. At the end of the day, just here to take bets and try and make sure that everyone feels secure and comfortable in where they put their money, where they play, and try and have that open line of communication as much as possible.
To your point about this being a form of betting in its own right, certain wagers being placed, if you will, on the business behind all of this, I'm reminded of a line that stuck with me from the book Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, that everything is a bet, when you distill it down to the bottom line. So, Adam, if we look at this as a really big bet that you're placing, that Plannatech and Prime are placing, how would you distill it down to the top one or two make or break factors if we look ahead to post football season, post World Cup, post the football season to follow the World Cup, when you've said you'll kind of come up for air and assess everything? What are those top factors that you think are looking now like they could be the make or break dynamics in all of this?
Well, there's a few. Again, the next few weeks is about the conversations and negotiations with prime sports vendors, the market accesses. Those are the first conversations that need to be had. Then making sure or working with the regulators to make this transition happen. Then it's getting less friendly results, as the big box stores like to say, is their struggles through September and whatnot were based on player-friendly results. Well, I guess we need a few unfriendly results for players where it's given it more to the house and the books and whatnot. But I think that all comes in cycles. And yes, you could have it that the World Cup's just run by favorites and overs and stuff like that, and we all have a horrible World Cup and, play it out. But it's more than that. I think it's just building the customer base, knowing how to take a bet, building the bookmaker aspect of it, and just doing it like bookmakers have done for 100 years in other parts of the world. That's sort of the key to the game, and that's what we're trying to do. And yes, now it's as much gambling on aspects of the business, the data costs, all these other bits and pieces that you have to plug together. I guess it's really being a coach or a general manager of a football team. You've got to have those pieces come together. You can have the best talent in the world, the best contracts, the best data, all this stuff, but it still needs to gel and all come together. And you need a bit of luck in it all. And the other aspect of it is hopefully the states that are in don't go doubling taxes or anything crazy like that. There's so many of these things that are out of our control. Right now, what we're trying to do is just manage what's within our control and just make that better, more efficient, more sustainable, which is very hard in the state regulated model. But that's what we're jumping into this challenge with both feet. And again, for me, all it is adding another 3 states for Plannatech to be an operator and work within cohesion of the current team that's at the Prime Sports.
Well, Adam, as a closing message here, what would you like to say as we prepare to part ways for any take-home thoughts for bettors, partners, or even competitors watching this unfold?
For the competitive aspect of it, we are who we are. We've never really seen anyone else as competitors within the US borderlands. For players, it's just don't panic. We've got this. We've got it handled. We know what we're doing. We'll get this thing shipped upright and pushing forward. It's just, if you've taken the ride to this point, stay on the bandwagon. We'll get through this and we'll come out even stronger on the other side.
All right. With that, we will tie a bow around this special episode to the audience. If you're betting with Prime Sports, keep on keeping on. And either way, we appreciate you betting on Prime Suspects as a worthy use of your time. Thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at @PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.